And what is your level of previous experience with Buddhism, meditation, anything like this?
So, Buddhism now has been 3 years.
3 years?
That I am quite committed to it, I would say.
Oh,
Every
okay.
time I'm in India, I go to one of the centers, either at Tushita or Buddhist Institute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So every time I'm in India, I see teachings. I've mainly followed Venerable Namjong.
Okay, yeah.
So I was following him around, kind of thing, all the way to Europe.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
But I wish I had discovered this place.
I see. And where do you normally live?
That's a good question.
That's my job.
I don't know how to answer it right now.
Okay.
I
Yes.
work for a hotel business, so they send me to different places every time there is a mission I'm appointed to. So I don't really have. I'm from France, so it's a
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Well, enchanté. Great. So now we'll see if our visitor has more knowledge than our locals. Okay. No, it's not a competition. All right. So usually, on the Sunday morning, then maybe some people are having brunch, so they roll in a little bit later. So we usually like to start with meditation for 2 reasons. One, to allow the latecomers to come, but otherwise, it's good to just get a bit of mental stability and kind of clarity before we start the teachings. So let's start in the usual way. Please get into a comfortable meditation position. And the rest of you should all know what that means. So, most important thing, having a straight back. And then you can put your hands in the lap, the left hand down first, the right hand on top, and the thumbs gently touching. Making sure that the shoulders are not rounded, so you can roll them up and back. So the eyes just slightly open to allow some light in, but the mouth closed. Then just take a moment to scan the body from head to toe, trying to identify any areas of tension that we're holding, particularly around the eyes, the facial muscles, wherever you notice tension, just let it go. Then in the shoulders, the neck and shoulders, we often hold some tension there. So if there's a bit of tension that is harder to let go, you can imagine that you're breathing into that area. And as you exhale, you're also releasing the tension with the breath. Then go all the way down to the toes, through the torso, the arms, the seat, the legs. bodies have become released of all tension, we direct our attention to the breath. So here we're working with the natural breath as it is. And you might notice that as we inhale and exhale, there are certain sensations in the body associated with the inhalation and exhalation. So either at the rising and falling of the abdomen, or the space around the nasal apertures, or the nostrils, upper lip area. Become aware of the sensations. As we try to remain focused on the breath, if other appearances come to mind, be they external sounds and the like, or internal thoughts, then don't pay much attention to them. You can note that they are present, but without clinging to the pleasant sensations or aversion to the unpleasant. Just let them dissolve back into the nature of the mind. voice back to the room. So I'm coming off of a cold.
Would you like some Ibast? I have tablets on me.
Some what?
Ibast. It'll stop the runny nose for at least next 2-3 hours.
What is the active ingredient?
But it won't put you to sleep.
No?
You can check and see.
See, I'm not familiar with this drug, so I feel a bit... I'm not going to take it. But, you know, just... Okay. So here at the center, we have various kind of programs and lectures. And today, and last night, and a continuing series that we're going through, is a commentary on the Heart Sutra. Are you familiar with the Heart Sutra?
Not so much.
Not so much.
Legally.
Okay. So, this is now probably what? The 5th class? 6th? Sixth. So we're in the 6th class of the Heart Sutra, yet we're only on the prologue of the sutra. Which, yeah, shows that maybe we'll need more than 10 classes. So in any case, let me just start off with a quick kind of reminder that we should all adjust our motivation, thinking that the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings, and therefore, in order that I may be able to free sentient beings from the oceans of samsaric suffering and lead them to the highest state of enlightenment, I myself must first become enlightened, and therefore I need to train my mind, in all of the stages of the path to enlightenment, particularly the perfection of wisdom, the prajnaparamita, and therefore I will participate listening to the lecture, reflecting on the meaning, so that I can quickly become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay. So, let us now do one recitation of the preliminary prayers. So you all have this deep blue book. So on the second to the last page, there's the practice of the prajnaparamita, the wisdom going beyond. Yes? So first, refuge in bodhicitta. These stanzas are often recited at the beginning to further bolster our resolve and motivation and intention. So again, not just reciting the words with the mouth, but reflecting on the meaning contained. So here thinking about the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The Buddha being the teacher, the Dharma being the teachings, and the Supreme Assembly, or the Sangha, being the community of spiritual aspirants. Remembering the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and wishing to, aspire to gain those qualities ourselves, then we reaffirm our commitment to the path. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the virtuous merit I create by practicing giving and other perfections, and I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the virtuous merit that I create by practicing giving and other perfections, and I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the virtuous merit that I create by practicing giving and other perfections, and I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so now turn the page, and we'll do a recitation of the Heart Sutra itself. And since some of you haven't been here, if you wish to fully participate in this module on the Heart Sutra, we've had as a homework assignment to memorize the Heart Sutra. So even if you're going, not staying around very long, it'd be good to memorize. Okay. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara, looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara. Shakyamuni, son of the lineage trained, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom. He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage, or daughter of the lineage, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to including no mind element, and element of consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, mind without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Taita, gate gate, pada sam, gate bodhi swaha. Sharipuja the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, she trained to perform perfection and wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva Aralekhteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the other gods rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shaitavati Putra, Bodhisattva Mahasattva Aralekhteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. This next prayer to remove obstacles is often recited after the Heart Sutra. It's actually the mantra of the lion-faced bikini, which there's a picture of there. I prostrate to the gathering of dakinis in the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space by your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation. Look after practitioners like Abhadra Aka Samara Sasadara Shamaraya Peya. Samaraya pe tayata gate gate parasam gate bodhi soha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now. Hello?
Yeah, it's on there.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So, since most of you have not been here for all the sessions, I actually wanted to do this last night, but we got a bit sidetracked. And that is as a means of setting the context for what we're doing with, analyzing the sutra. I wanted to go over the prologue of another text, which is Lama Tsongkhapa's Essence of Eloquence, or Lama Tsongkhapa, right? Yes. So Lama Tsongkhapa, a great Tibetan master, and he wrote 5 major texts on the profound view of emptiness. And this text, the Essence of Eloquence, was the first text that he, started to compose, the first major text he started to compose after he got the, direct realization of emptiness in his life. So, actually it is said he started to write a commentary on Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. But as he was starting to compose that text, he thought, actually there's a lot of more context that needs to be sort of explained so that the people can understand Nagarjuna. Because within the Nagarjuna text, there's a lot of debates that are going back and forth between different tenet systems within Buddhism. And then if you don't have the proper context, then it's very hard to understand the essence of those debates, right? So the short name of the text is Essence of Eloquence, but in the longer name, it's Trang Nye Lekshe Ningpo, right? So Trang is like interpretable, yeah. Nye is definitive. So what is interpretable and definitive but the Buddha's teachings? Okay, within all of the so-called 84,000 heaps of the doctrine, or the 108 volumes of sutras, right? We had categorized them into, the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, which we touched on before. But there's another categorization into 2. Interpretable meaning sutras or scriptures, and definitive meaning scriptures, right? Okay. So, not everything that the Buddha uttered in his life was, is to be taken literally, right? Because as we mentioned yesterday, the Buddha would guide beings slowly and to their own individual levels of intelligence and dispositions and needs, right? And so, in order to help them arrive to the ultimate, most profound view, which is extremely profound and difficult to realize, he would then teach something as a kind of, approximation, or like rungs of a ladder, or like a staircase of increasing subtlety. So some things were just used as what we call, skillful means, right? Not to be taken literally. Okay? So within this text, he then distinguishes, what are the criteria for something to be called an interpretable meaning scripture or a definitive meaning scripture. Okay? So, I'm just going to go over the prologue of that text, which is about 2 pages. And, Shanti, were you here when I did this before, many years ago?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. At that time, I had said, and I still believe this, I said, just learning Tibetan, right, would be worth it. So you could read these 2 pages in the original Tibetan. Okay. So anyway, so Tsongkhapa starts by quoting the Superior Sutra of the Questions of Rashtapala, which is in the Piles of Jewels Sutra. Okay? Due to being endowed with compassion, through hundreds of skillful means and reasonings, you cause transmigrating beings who wander due to not knowing the modes of emptiness, quiescence, and no production, to enter into understanding these 3 doors of liberation. Okay? So, okay. So first, transmigrating beings. Okay? You'll see this. In the Tibetan, it's drowa, right? So in the first stanza that we recited on refuge and bodhicitta, right? Sangye chodan sogi chonam lang janchu badu dani kapsuchi, right? Dagi jin sogi bisonagi, jola penchir, right? Drola penchir. So, penchir is to benefit. Drola, how is it translated there? Huh? Sentient beings, maybe? Yeah, may I attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is very fond of doing a more literal translation. So dro is actually to go, right? To go. But here, like, they translate it as transmigratory beings or transmigrating beings. Okay? So who is that? Sentient beings. Yeah. So why are all sentient beings transmigrators? So there's two senses of the word. Okay? One is within the 6 realms of samsara. Okay? So what again is samsara? Nishita, right? So, remember you asked me last night, who gets to decide who has become an arhat, which means who has attained nirvana. And then I said, someone who has attained nirvana is someone who has abandoned samsara. So then the first question is, what then is samsara, right? So what did I say last night? What is samsara?
The birth that is rooted in afflicted emotions and ignorance that can trigger birth in the samsaric world.
Okay, no, don't, yeah, okay. Is that your final answer?
No, so I'm trying. So you're asking me what is samsara?
Yes.
So I would give an answer. The cycle of birth. Okay.
You said many good things there. You just have to put it all together. So it's the continuum of uncontrolled rebirth due to karma and afflictions. Right? Okay.
Yes, karma, not ignorance. Karma.
Well, no, both.
Karma.
So within the afflictions, there's ignorance. Okay, anyway. So now what we're saying, okay, transmigrating beings, where do they transmigrate? Within the 6 realms of samsara. Okay? So then the other thing in the etymology of drola, right? Drowa. Also, there's this thought like uncontrolled rebirth. You know, it's like the animals in line to be slaughtered outside the slaughterhouse, right? Every step they take, they get closer to being slaughtered, right? So we as, samsaric beings, we don't have control of our lifespan, right? And every step we take, on a figurative level, we get closer to death, right? So one of the sufferings of samsara is, in the 8 types of suffering, there's a suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, right? So any sentient being, right, who's not yet attained liberation will experience, the uncontrolled death. Okay? Alright. So, transmigrating beings, okay? That's us. Okay? So they then wander, right? Wander is kind of like, right, without direction, right? They wander due to not knowing the modes of emptiness, quiescence, and no production. Okay? So basically those are what are called the 3 doors of liberation. Emptiness being the lack of inherent existence, right? Quiescence being, well, the lack of, how do you say it? Inherently existent causes leading to inherently existent effects, and no production. Sorry, I think I reversed them. One is no inherently existing effects arising from no inherently existent causes, and the other is the flip side. No inherently existent causes leading to inherently existent effects. Okay? These are all just different modes of emptiness. Okay? So basically, why do sentient beings cycle through samsara? is because of this not understanding emptiness. Right? Because the root of samsara, of the two, karma and afflictions, afflictions is primary, and of all the afflictions, the root of the root is the misapprehension of how ourselves and other phenomena exist. Okay? Alright. So the Buddha, then, endowed with compassion, means a wish to that others be free from suffering, right? Having the wish to, that others be free from suffering, and then identifying that the cause for sentient beings to suffer is this afflictive ignorance, not knowing the mode of emptiness, right? Then, through hundreds of skillful means and reasonings, okay, causing transmigrating beings to enter into the understanding of the three doors of liberation, okay? So here, through hundreds of skillful means and reasonings, okay, that is what we talked about with the whole, how do you say, leading sentient beings gradually through types of teachings that, on the face of it, in that moment, are useful for sentient beings, but ultimately do not describe the final view of reality.
It's a larger picture.
So, this is what I was saying, right? This would be an interpretable meaning, teaching, right? Through skillful means telling you something that ultimately isn't the final answer, but it causes you to take a step closer to the meaning of truth, right? So, just as an example, right? In the mind-only school, okay, the ultimate view is that no phenomena has inherent existence, okay? But in the mind-only school, the Buddha teaches that there's three types of phenomena, right? What is called other-powered phenomena, thoroughly established phenomena, and thoroughly imputed phenomena. And in that, he says that thoroughly imputed phenomena lack inherent existence. But the other powered phenomena and thoroughly established phenomena have inherent existence. You understand? So, the teaching that the other powered phenomena and thoroughly established phenomena have inherent existence ultimately needs to be abandoned, right? But by teaching that the thoroughly imputed phenomena lack inherent existence, then, see, it's a little bit easier to understand how those imputed phenomena would lack inherent existence. So as a kind of temporary, a temporary sort of stepping stone, then the Buddha would teach those to beings who aren't capable of having the full understanding right off the bat. You understand? Okay. Alright. So, that's that. Thus, it is said that the compassionate teacher, perceiving that the thusness of phenomena is very difficult to realize, and that, if it is not realized, one cannot be released from psychic existence, brings about the thorough understanding of that suchness through many modes of skillful means and approaches of reasoning. Sorry. So here again, right, many modes of skillful means and many approaches of reasoning. This would be then the differences in like a subtlety of the level of the view of reality that is being taught. right? As we mentioned many times, there's a difference between, like for example, the emptiness of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person and the inherent existence of a person, right? So, as we often say, okay, a very coarse understanding of the selflessness of person would be, you know, like we said, my body, my mind, right? My body, my mind. There's a thought of a sort of I who is a controller or a sort of owner of the five aggregates, the body and mind, right? And then this this I actually doesn't exist. But we have a sense of an I that is somehow, you know, separate to the body and mind, and sort of persists throughout space and time, right? We have this sense of, you know, we look at the picture of ourselves when we were, you know, whatever, our high school graduation, and we say, oh, that was me. That was me when I was 18. Oh, that was me when I took the, you know, holiday to Goa, or whatever, right? So there's a sense of an I, right? That is somehow separate from, but yet controls the body and mind. Okay? So, that one doesn't exist, right? But the mere realization of that is not the subtlest view of selflessness of the person. Okay? But that view that I just described is easier to understand. So as a kind of, you know, temporary measure, as a stepping stone, then that view was taught in the sutras and in many of the Buddhist texts as being the view that would allow one to become liberated from samsara. Okay? You know, like we were saying yesterday in relation to the Shantideva text. Okay? So all of the schools below the Prasangika Madhyamika say that that view, the emptiness of the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, is all that is required to attain liberation. The realization of emptiness is not required. Yeah? So anyway, through many modes of skillful means and approaches of reasoning. Okay? That's what that refers to. These kind of, you know, differences in the subtlety of view. Okay. Therefore, those having discrimination must work at a technique for thoroughly understanding how suchness is. Moreover, this depends upon differentiating those meanings that require interpretation and those that are definitive within the scriptures of the conqueror. Furthermore, the differentiation of these two cannot be done merely through scriptures that state, this is a meaning to be interpreted, that is a meaning that is definitive. For Buddha spoke variously in relation to the thoughts of trainees, and otherwise the composition of commentaries on Buddha's thought differentiating the interpretable and definitive by the great openers of the chariot ways, Nagarjuna and Asanga, would have been senseless. Also, scriptures such as Sutra Unraveling the Thought and teachings of the Akshayamati Sutra set forth many conflicting modes of positing the interpretable and definitive. Okay, so hold on, let me stop here. Okay, so what is this saying? Okay, of all, okay, we need to understand emptiness in order to become liberated. Okay, in order to then understand emptiness, we then need to, you know, arrive at the final view. To arrive at the final view of emptiness, we need to rely on the Buddha's proclamations of it. And among the various statements of Buddha, we then need to differentiate between which are of definitive meaning and which are of interpretable meaning, right? But how do we do that? We can't just do that by looking within the sutra itself, and then if a sutra says in the words, oh, this is a definitive meaning sutra, to then say, okay, it's a definitive meaning sutra, right? Okay? Because actually in some sutras that are definitive meaning, in some sutras it will say, this is definitive meaning sutra. And though that sutra is interpretable meaning. And then another sutra, the sutra that's pointed to there, that one will say, no, this one is interpretable meaning. No, this one is definitive meaning and the other one is interpretable, right? So just the fact that within the words of the sutra, it says this is interpretable, this is definitive, can't be necessarily definitive. Okay? Okay. Why? So now here, Tsongkhapa gives 3 reasons. Okay? Otherwise, the composition of the commentaries on the Buddha's thought, differentiating the interpretable and definitive by the great openers of the chariot ways, would have been senseless. Okay? So we have, Nagarjuna and Sangha, who are known as the great openers of chariot ways, Shingta Solche, or you sometimes see it as trailblazers. Okay? So those are the 2 main commentators on the Buddha's thought, right? Nagarjuna being the opener of the chariot way. Okay, that should be explained what that is. Okay, so in ancient times, right, if you want to have a like a path, right, for a chariot, right, though the bushes and all that kind of rocks and so forth need to be cleared away first, right? Okay. So in general, when the Buddha came to the world, he taught the 4 tenet systems: Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. Okay? Then it is said, and we touched on this last night, some say the Mahayana teachings were not very widespread. It was just taught to a very select group of disciples. Okay? So then, after the Buddha passed away, those teachings fell into decline. There were, not many people openly practicing the Mahayana teachings. And then so later, it's like the path for the chariot became overgrown with bushes, right? Weeds. So then Nagarjuna came, and there's different thoughts about when, like how long after the Buddha Nagarjuna came. But anyway, some centuries after the Buddha, Nagarjuna came and sort of revitalized the Mahayana doctrine. Okay, and then Asanga did that in relation to the mind-only school. He came after Nagarjuna. So those 2 are known as the great openers of the chariot ways, because they set forth the doctrine of the Madhyamika and the Chittamatra schools in their commentaries. Okay? Alright. So now, in those commentaries, they then set out the requirements for what it would be for a teaching to be definitive or interpretable. Right? So, if we could just look at the sutra itself, and then if that sutra says this is definitive meaning, we can then say, oh, it's definitive meaning. Then Nagarjuna and Asanga's work and composing those commentaries to establish what is definitive and interpretable would have been senseless. Right? Okay, so that's point 1. 2, the scriptures set forth many conflicting modes of positing the interpretable and definitive. Okay? So, here, in kind of brackets, the translator has put the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. Sutra Unraveling the Thought is a sutra in the third turning of the Wheel of Dharma. It is a mind-only school sutra. And in that sutra, it says that the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma, the Prajaparamita Sutras, are interpretable meaning. Okay? Right? But the Sutra Unraveling the Thought itself is definitive. Yeah? Okay. Now, the teachings of Akshayamati, the Akshayamati Sutra, right? That's the second turning of the wheel of Dharma Sutra. And in that one, it says that it is definitive and the Sutra Unraveling the Thought is interpretable. Okay? So that's reason 2. If we could just take it as, as fact, if a sutra says it's definitive, then these would, contradict each other, right? Then 3, through scriptural passages merely saying about a topic, this is so, such cannot be posited. Okay, so that means, although there is a scriptural passage that says about a topic, this is so, okay, in general, though a scriptural passage says this is so, it doesn't necessarily mean it is so, right?
The Buddha doesn't speak falsely.
No. Yeah. Okay. So? No, it's like this, right? Okay. Sometimes the teacher, sometimes I have to do this with you guys, but not today. When the students are talking in class, right? Sometimes the teacher's going to say, okay, go ahead, you can talk. So what is the teacher saying?
Shut up.
But the words are saying, you can talk, right? But the meaning is, don't talk, right? Okay? So, here it's saying, scriptural passages merely saying about a topic, this is so, doesn't necessarily mean it is so. Okay? It's like in the 4 reliances that we've touched on before, right? Rely on the meaning, not the words. Right? Well, first it's actually rely on the teachings, not the person. Right? Rely on the meaning, not the words. Rely on the definitive meaning, not the interpretable meaning. And rely on the direct perception, not the conceptual understanding. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. Okay? So, through scriptural passages merely saying about a topic, this is so, such cannot be posited. And if then, in general, it is not necessarily suitable to accept whatever is indicated on the literal level in sutras, mere statements in sutra of this is interpretable and that is definitive also cannot establish about specifics the interpretable and definitive that such is necessarily so. Okay. You guys understand? So if in general, just because something in sutra says this is like this, if in general that's not true, then about a specific point that a statement, this is definitive, isn't necessarily definitive. You understand? I might end up taking that drug. Just because I'm out of these. Nice. Okay. So therefore, one must seek the Buddha's thought, following the 2 great openers of the chariot ways, Nagarjuna and Asanga, who were prophesied as differentiating the interpretable and definitive in the Buddhist scriptures, and who commented on the thought of the interpretable and definitive, and, moreover, settled it well through reasoning that damages the interpretation of the meaning of definitive scriptures as anything else, and establishes that, within their being unfit to be interpreted otherwise, the final mode of subsistence explained in them is definite just in that meaning. Therefore, in the end, the differentiation between interpretable and definitive must be made just by stainless reasoning. Because if a proponent asserts a tenet contradicting reasoning, that person is not suitable to be a valid being with respect to that topic. And because the suchness of things also has reasoned proofs, which are established by way of logical correctness. Okay, so what is this then saying? One must seek Buddhist thought following the two great openers of the chariot ways, right? Nagarjuna and Asanga, who were prophesied as differentiating the interpretable and definitive in Buddhist scriptures. Okay, so here, actually, one of Tsongkhapa's projects is to kind of argue against, and he'll do this throughout the text, he's going to be arguing against another school that came up called the Jonangpas. Okay? This school in Tibet, you know, we say that there's 4 main tenet systems within Buddhist, doctrine. So the Jonangpas actually posit a 5th tenet system, which they call the Great Middle Way. And they say that the Great Middle Way is the highest. And within that, they sort of take elements of the Chittamatra school, as well as the Madhyamika school, and combine that to what they call the Great Middle Way. Okay? But here, what Tsongkhapa is saying is, you know, Nagarjuna and Asanga were prophesied by Buddha to be the great openers of the chariot ways of the Madhyamika and the Chittamatra. Okay? So you have to rely on their proclamations, right? And not, you know, sort of fabricate your own, trying to kind of synthesize these, the two of them together. Okay? Okay? So, you need to rely on them, okay? And then not only that, settle love, okay, through reasoning, what then Nagarjuna and Asanga do in those scriptures is they settled it well through reasoning, okay? They use reasoning that damages the interpretation of the meaning of definitive scriptures as anything else, okay? And establishes that within their being unfit to be interpreted otherwise, the final mode of subsistence explained in them is definite as just that meaning. Okay, so what that means is, so it's actually, it's probably, this debate comes up, right? Because among Nagarjuna and Asanga, actually, Asanga's interpretation, since it's according to the mind-only school, right, is the mind-only school explained by Asanga established well through reasoning that damages the interpretation of the meaning of definitive scriptures as anything else? Hello?
Don't know.
No, right? So it's a bit strange. It's a bit strange. The words of it, it's like, we need to rely on Nagarjuna and Asanga, because in their text, they set out what is definitive through reasoning that cannot be established in another way. But actually, between the two, only Nagarjuna has done that, because Nagarjuna has done it in relation to the Madhyamika school, and the Madhyamika school is the one that ultimately is verifiable through reasoning. The Chittamatra school itself is ultimately refuted by the Madhyamika, right? Okay? So on one hand we see Tsongkhapa here is saying we must rely on the two because the two of them, settle it well through reasoning that damages the interpretation of the meaning of definitive scriptures as anything else, right? But actually, it's only Nagarjuna that really does that. Okay? Alright. So therefore, in the end, the differentiation between the interpretable and definitive must be made just by stainless reasoning. Because if a proponent asserts a tenet contradicting reasoning, that person is not suitable to be a valid being with respect to that topic. Okay. So here, it's almost like Tsongkhapa goes back, right? So he's like, okay, yes, the Buddha did prophesy those two as being the great openers of chariot ways. We need to rely on their scriptures. But in the end, we have to only rely on definitive reasoning. Well, so that's the thing, right? Before we understand, it's a little bit circular here, right? In order to understand emptiness, right? In order to understand the final view of reality, we need to understand which are interpretable and definitive meaning scriptures. But in order to determine what's a definitive and interpretable meaning scripture, how do we do that?
You have to read that one.
Reasoning. We need reasoning, okay? And what reasoning? Reasoning that establishes emptiness, right? So it's a little bit like which comes first, the chicken and the egg, right? How do we know amongst Nagarjuna's scriptures, right, that say all phenomena lack inherent existence, and if we read Asanga, then he'll say, well, no, actually, the mind and thoroughly established phenomena, those are inherently existent. Okay? So we have those two. So which are interpretable and which are definitive between the two? We need to establish then that the thought that all phenomena lack inherent existence is established by valid reasoning. In order to do that, we need to understand emptiness. So it's almost like in order to determine what are definitive meaning and interpretable meaning scriptures, we need to first realize emptiness. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, then at the beginning it says, in order to realize emptiness, we need to understand what is the interpretable and definitive meaning scriptures.
You take it as a hypothesis that this is definitive and this is interpreted, then you would reason it out and whichever convinces you of that.
We have to realize emptiness or understand emptiness. Because if we realize emptiness, then we don't really need somebody else's views, right? Is it realize or understand?
I don't think one can understand it without realizing it as well, right?
No, understanding it conceptually is different from realizing it directly. So if you realize it directly, you don't need somebody else's point of view.
If realizing emptiness is the ultimate, where does the interpretive and definitive come in? They become irrelevant because the ultimate has been achieved. So what does it matter whether it is interpretive or definitive?
Okay. Alright guys, some things to think about. But in general, I like what you said, Shanti, right? So we can take things on as a hypothesis, right, before realizing it. Okay? But Subhashini and Aban, right? So if you're then saying after one has realized emptiness, okay, then one doesn't need to receive teachings on emptiness anymore because one has realized it directly. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying...
Huh?
No, I didn't say
Wait, so Aban has said yes. So, Aban, you have a direct realization of emptiness on the path of seeing, right? So you still have to traverse the 10 grounds.
No, I mean having done all that.
Okay, so then you're talking about a Buddha, right?
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So, okay, a Buddha, yeah, doesn't need to receive teachings. But one receives one attains the direct realization of emptiness on the path of seeing. That's the first bhumi, first ground. One still has to traverse the 10 grounds.
Okay.
So it even says very clearly in the text that a 10th ground bodhisattva, who in that life is going to become a Buddha, receives teachings, even though they've directly realized emptiness. Okay?
It depends on which stage of realization you are.
Well, no, that means 10th ground. Like, let's say, you know, you're going to become a Buddha today. Actually, you're going to, okay, a 10th ground bodhisattva. You're going to enter your last meditative equipoise on emptiness as a sentient being today. Okay? Wow, amazing, right? Still that morning, you would receive teachings on emptiness. Okay?
So what do you further realize after path of seeing? The subtleties or conviction, what is it, Venerable? Vividness?
See, okay, there's no difference in the object of the realization of the meditative equipoise among the bodhisattvas of the 10 grounds. Emptiness is the same. There's no like, you know, one realizes a coarser emptiness on the first ground and a more subtle emptiness. No, there's nothing like that. Understand?
Yes, Venerable.
So?
This is power of the mind, how convinced it is and how vivid it is.
No. Also not that. How convinced and vivid it is, how convinced you are. No, it's not like, you know, the bodhisattva on the path of seeing, it's like, okay, all things lack inherent existence. And then on the second ground, someone's like, no, they really lack inherent existence.
I think the appearance comes to you, but you don't believe it. That's also part of it, right?
No. See, those 10 grounds, they're not differentiated by anything like that. Right? What is differentiated is, you know, since the accumulation of merit is different, then those minds that realize emptiness have more power to abandon the obscurations. Okay? Therefore, there's a statement that, you know, amongst the 10 grounds, this is actually a kind of big debate, but yeah, I don't think we can go into that. But anyway, okay, just for now, for our purposes, the object that is realized by bodhisattvas on all the 10 grounds is the same. There's no difference with coarseness or subtlety. There's no difference in their, you know, post-meditative realization. Okay? But there is difference in what that direct realization of emptiness, you know, its power to abandon the obscurations. And then, you know, of course, on the 8th ground, one has abandoned the obscurations, the afflictive obscurations. One no longer has the, you know, nyomo, the klesha. Okay? Now, there is some like mental facility that allows one, they say this, you know, on the seventh ground, right? One is able to enter in, go in and out of meditative absorption on emptiness within, you know, like a split second, right? But that is like mental dexterity, right? It's not having to do with the object. Okay? So why were we talking about this? We were talking about this because...
circular reasoning.
Yeah. Apparent, it's not circular, but on the words of it, it seems circular. Where Tsongkhapa is saying, we need to understand emptiness to gain liberation. In order to understand emptiness, we need to differentiate between what scriptures are definitive and interpretable. But in order to differentiate what are interpretable and definitive, we need to realize emptiness.
Can I ask a question, please?
In 1 second. So here in one of the footnotes, there's one commentator, Guntang Tempe Drome. So here it says, Guntang makes a critical differentiation between Sunak Gi Changi Chepa and Sunak La Changi Chepa. So here the translator says, I translate the former as differentiating the interpretable and definitive within the scriptures, and the latter as differentiating the interpretable and definitive with respect to the scriptures. Admittedly, the English is no clearer than the Tibetan. According to him, the former, differentiating the interpretable and definitive within the scriptures, means to identify which are interpretable and which are definitive scriptures from among the scriptures. Okay? Whereas the latter, differentiating the interpretable and the definitive with respect to scriptures, means to differentiate the interpretable and definitive with respect to the meaning of the scriptures. This requiring extensive delineation of the presentation of the two truths, which itself requires realization of emptiness. Therefore, the latter cannot be required for realization of emptiness, whereas the former can. You understand? The latter is called differentiating the interpretable and definitive on the level of meaning that is expressed within the scriptures, whereas the former is called differentiating the interpretable and definitive on the level of the words that are the means of expression. You understand? So this is saying, there's the two, right? We need to understand which is an interpretable and definitive meaning scripture, okay? But there's the first, which is to say, for example, that Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, or the Prajnaparamita Sutra, is a definitive meaning scripture. In order to just merely identify that that scripture is interpretable meaning or a definitive meaning, one doesn't have to realize emptiness. Okay? But so that is differentiating the interpretable and definitive on the level of the words that are the means of expression. Okay? So that you don't need to realize emptiness. But differentiating the interpretable and definitive on the level of the meaning that is expressed within that scripture, right? Then you need to realize emptiness. You understand? Okay. So that's how Gundang Rinpoche gets out of that apparent contradiction, and that's fine. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Subhashini, you may ask your question now. Thank you for being patient.
There seems to be so much of emphasis on the realization of emptiness in the Mahayana context. And somehow one gets the feeling that bodhicitta is downplayed. Because if we are talking of wisdom and compassion, and wisdom is all the time being concentrated upon as realization of emptiness, and this whole issue of interpretive and definitive and the tenet schools, etc., etc. So where does bodhicitta come into it? If it's complementary to the realization of emptiness.
Okay. So.
Which is wisdom in the Mahayana context.
Yeah. Okay. So let me play back your question. Actually, let me not do that. Let me say this. So you see here, we are embarking on a commentary on the Heart Sutra, right? Okay. So the kind of explicit subject matter of the Heart Sutra is emptiness. Emptiness only. It doesn't talk explicitly about the method side, bodhicitta. Okay? Right? Right? So, in the context of giving a teaching or a commentary on the Heart Sutra, right, that is the main emphasis, because the explicit subject matter is that. Right? Now, where does the method side, the bodhicitta, come in? Well, in actual words, and we're going to get to this after the break, I hope. In the actual words of the sutra, right? How does a bodhisattva train who wishes to practice the profound activity? Who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, right? So then, in the commentaries on the Heart Sutra, when you see the word bodhisattva, there's like, a multi-page explanation of what a bodhisattva is. What is bodhi? What is sattva? What is a bodhisattva? All this stuff. And in there, you get to the, explanation of bodhicitta, right? But, it's not contradictory to say, right, because you need both, right, there will be certain scriptures that will emphasize one and not the other, right? And the Heart Sutra is, emphasizing the emptiness side. So if you were to only look at the sutra, you might get that thought, oh wait, what about bodhicitta, right? But the point is, you would have more than just this sutra to study, right? You'd be studying the Bodhisattva Taragatara, right? For the full explanation about how to generate bodhicitta and all this stuff, right? So it's said that all of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, okay, the explicit subject matter is emptiness. And the path side, the method side, is the hidden meaning of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Right? So what was, then the Abhisamayalankara talks explicitly about the hidden meaning of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Right? So there you get all of the bodhicitta. The path side, the 10 grounds, the 5 paths, all that is explicitly taught in the Abhisamayalankara. You understand? So I guess my point is, there seems to be this emphasis on emptiness, Well, yes, because we're dealing with a scripture whose explicit subject matter is emptiness, and only emptiness. But you as a aspiring bodhisattva, you're not just satisfied with the Heart Sutra, right?
No, I didn't say that at all.
No, I know. So,
Nobody to comment on the Heart Sutra.
so that's what I'm saying. So,
Even to become an arhat,
yeah,
the prerequisite is to get a glimpse of emptiness and emptiness. Again, there we have not talked at all of bodhicitta. What comes across is that the realization of emptiness seems to be paramount in the Mahayana path. And in some way, bodhicitta is implicit, and this is much more explicit, because as you have just said, and which is also very pertinent, that the Heart Sutra deals with the whole issue of emptiness and the realization of emptiness, and what is emptiness, etc., etc.
yeah, okay.
And of course, we've read out Aswakapa and explained that Nagarjuna and Asanga, whatever they said, and how Aswakapa elaborates on it, or kinds of, gives his own commentary on that.
Yeah.
So, what I said was in that context. Not that I'm questioning the wisdom of Heart Sutra or realization.
Yeah.
But as I said, to start with, when we talk of somebody becoming an arhat,
Yeah.
they have to realize emptiness.
Yes.
So again, the whole issue of...
It doesn't come across all of us like that, Subhashini, only to you.
So, listening to what you said, then I responded to that. So my response did not cut away your doubt? Huh? No.
No, I'm sorry,
So you said something, right? Then I responded to it. So my response didn't clear away your doubt? Do you have a remaining doubt, or are you just kind of, pontificating?
excuse me?
Do you have a remaining doubt?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so what is that?
I have just spelled it out. I've said that the accent seems to be on emptiness. As I said, even to become an arhat, you have to realize emptiness.
So that's true.
Yes.
Okay, and then?
Where is bodhicitta coming there?
So to become an arhat, to merely become an arhat, you don't need bodhicitta. So that there wouldn't, it's unnecessary, right? So I don't see why that's a problem.
Considering that they are complementary, the realization of emptiness and bodhicitta in the Mahayana path.
Okay. But to become an arhat, one doesn't need to enter the Mahayana path, right?
Isn't it an aspiration to become an arhat so that one escapes the cycle of samsara and is liberated from the agonies of going through that?
Okay, we're doing a little bit like this. So let me just say, is this clicking because the battery's almost out?
Subhashini, be mindful about other people in the room and wasting their time also.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Just...
Excuse me, what is the comment?
There was no comment.
Huh?
There was no comment.
Oh, she did make a comment.
I didn't hear.
I think I'm entitled to ask a question.
I don't know about entitled.
And I do not think that if it is wasting time, it's for you to say that. You
Yeah,
are the
yeah.
teacher, and I would like you to say that.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. So therefore, please
Okay.
request the lady who has said that to put aside her personal views. Because if I'm here as a student,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
I'm entitled to ask a question to a teacher, and a teacher has a full right to tell me that this is not at the moment important, or there's no need to discuss it. Or I'm wasting people's time, etc., etc.
Okay.
I think bodhicitta should be practiced here first. You know? Kindness to others.
I agree.
One of those ladies who came, I asked her, how would you practice bodhicitta? She just said, just be kind, she said. One of the speakers, you know, I don't remember whether it is Tenzin Namjong or the other lady.
Yeah.
And I thought that seemed very, very pertinent, because that's the first step in life. To be tolerant and kind.
Yes. Well said.
Sorry?
Well said. Okay. So, in any case, let's just maybe take one step back and understand, because there is a lot of different terminology that comes up. And so this thought of, an arhat, right? That's what we were talking about last night. So let's just be clear, okay? An arhat, foe destroyer. Foe destroyer means, what is the foe but the afflictions, right? Okay. So a foe destroyer is another word for, someone who's attained nirvana. Then we have different types of nirvana. We have different kinds of arhats. We have a so-called Hinayana arhat, which is one who has attained personal liberation from samsara. Yeah. Then we also have a Mahayana arhat. A Mahayana arhat is a Buddha. Okay? And we were saying last night, a Mahayana practitioner is one who has, as their goal for practicing, the attainment of full enlightenment so that they can liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. Okay. So last time I came, we were talking about how we were talking about how the Prajaparamita is known as the Bhagavati, right? The mother. Yeah? The mother. So in the Prasangika Madhyamika tenet system, the wisdom realizing emptiness is the mother of all three types of Arya beings. All three types of arhats. Yeah? Okay? Which means the wisdom realizing emptiness is a necessary cause for the attainment of any type of arhatship. Okay? So in that sense, in general, the realization of emptiness is extremely important, no matter which, the Hinayana arhatship or Mahayana arhatship. If you want to be free of samsara, if you want to be free of suffering, you need the realization of emptiness. Right? That's the one door to liberation, is emptiness. So, in general, you'll see that being emphasized. Right? like Tsongkhapa himself says in the three principal paths, right? Three principal aspects of the path, right? Without the realization and correctly ascertaining the meaning of reality, even if one has meditated on renunciation and bodhicitta, one is not able to cut the root of samsara. Therefore, the intelligent put effort into realizing dependent arising. Okay? So, in general, you'll see that being emphasized. Okay. Now, in the particular Mahayana set of teachings, okay, you'll see both the what they call the profound meaning, means emptiness, and the extensive deeds. Okay? Those being discussed. Okay? Now, here, the Heart Sutra is a scripture that explicitly deals with the profound meaning, and the profound meaning only. Okay? Implicitly, it describes bodhicitta. Because that statement I mentioned, right? How does, bodhisattva train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? Okay, so, wishes to practice the activity, right? That means someone who wishes to practice the Mahayana. Who does that? Bodhisattva. So within that, you have actually kind of contained in there the method side of it. You have bodhicitta being explained. Okay?
So it's implicit.
In this scripture.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But in general, in the Mahayana scriptures, there are some that then treat bodhicitta in an explicit way. Right? And then you get the wisdom side in an implicit way. Right? Like for example, the 7-point mind training, right? The 7-point mind training teachings, you have all this discussion on the method side. And just one statement, view all phenomena like illusions. That's it. That's all you get on the wisdom side. So then, if, maybe other of us, we came to that teaching first, you'd be like, wow, there's all these, stanzas and all this stuff about method side. What about emptiness? Right? And then, if you ask that question to me, I'd say, oh, but wait, don't worry. We'll talk about the Heart Sutra later. We're not neglecting emptiness. But maybe since some of us were coming into the Heart Sutra first, we might have this thought, oh wait, but what about bodhicitta? So it's just, the way things go. If we take a very broad view, then it's like everything is contained in a, very complete manner. Okay? So, sadhana, at a certain point in the lecture.
No, I did that with a very different view. I'm in no hurry, but I did it out of a very different view.
I'm kind of joking. Thanks. All right, so let's finish. Let's finish this prologue of the essence of eloquence, and then we'll have a break. Okay? Almost done. So, therefore, in the end, differentiation between the interpretable and definitive must be made just by standardist reasoning, because if a proponent asserts a tenet contradicting reason, that person is not suitable to be a valid being with respect to that topic, and because the suchness of things also has reasoned proofs which are established by way of logical correctness. So this is also just my thought. Okay? Now, Tsongkhapa, when he came, he composed 18 volumes of scripture. Okay? Now, there are other masters like Tenzin Rinpoche, whose collected works actually spanned, I think Tenzin had maybe close to 50 volumes of writings, right? But the unique feature of Tsongkhapa is that he only commented on the very most difficult points that other masters of the time had not realized fully. Okay? So in his writings, you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff, right? So in general, on the method side, the stuff about generating bodhicitta, okay, it's not that difficult to understand. It's hard to, generate in your mental continuum, but we all basically know what we got to do, right? But the correct view of emptiness is very, it's like the razor's edge between the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism. And many of the previous masters, right, even these great scholars, they didn't arrive at the real view of emptiness. Okay? So Tsongkhapa in his writing was like, okay, that's what I got to do. I got to clear away these wrong views, and the wrong views are about emptiness. But about bodhicitta, well, he did write, some points talking about like the bodhisattva vows and, how to undertake the ritual for adopting the mind of enlightenment, right? But, 7-point cause and effect instructions or equalizing, exchanging self for others, those were largely, fine. There's not a lot of wrong views that came about it, right? Alright. It is from perceiving the import of this meaning that the differentiation of interpretable and definitive cannot be made by scripture alone, and that reasoning is required that Buddha says, like gold that is acquired upon being scorched, cut, and rubbed, my word is to be adopted by monastics and scholars upon analyzing it well, not out of respect for me. So, that stanza, I mention it many times here, His Holiness mentions it a lot. It's coming from, sutra, but this is right at the end of Tsongkhapa's prologue to his most famous text on emptiness, right? So here, right, it is, the analogy of someone trying to purchase gold only does so after analyzing through cutting it, rubbing it, and scorching it. So too, the Buddha is, uniquely saying that even though I say something, don't just accept it because I've said it out of respect for me, but adopt it only upon analyzing it well. Okay? So then, Tsongkhapa concludes by saying, thus, with respect to differentiating the interpretable and definitive, there are two parts. The position relying on the sutra unraveling the thought, and the position relying on the teachings of the Shakyamuni Sutra. Okay? So, sutra unraveling the thought, which turning of the wheel of Dharma is it? Third. And it's written from the perspective of Chittamatra. Then, Shakyamuni Sutra, second. and is written from the perspective of the Madhyamika. So the rest of the text, the Essence of Eloquence, will discuss those two, according to the Chitta Mantra and then according to the Madhyamika. Okay? So are there any questions on what I just talked about? Yes, okay.
You mentioned reliance, the four parts of reliance. I'm a little confused in how these two add up. You said that you have to rely on the meaning and not on the words.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that says you have to rely on the definitive and not on the interpretive. So how is definitive part of the meaning?
Definitive meaning.
Definitive comes with the words, not with the meaning. Meaning is the interpretation.
Sorry, I'm not fully understanding your question.
One of them, the first one, says that you have to rely on the meaning and not on the words. And then the third one, I think, says that you have to rely on the definitive and not the interpretation.
Yes.
Okay. But the interpretation is the meaning. Meaning is the interpretation. Definitive
The meaning
is the word.
Okay. So we have, interpretable meaning, which means, well, okay, even that is different according to the different tenet systems.
The meaning.
What it means to be interpretable.
Oh.
Okay? So let me just say this. In the mind-only school, I'm going to have to give you more context, okay? In the mind-only school, what it means for something to be interpretable and what it means for something to be definitive is whether it can be taken literally, face value of the words or not.
Yes.
Okay? In the Madhyamika, what makes something definitive is if something is describing emptiness. Okay? Then, if something is not describing emptiness, if something is describing a conventional phenomena, it is interpretable. Okay? That's Prasangika Madhyamika. Sautrantika Madhyamika, which is in the middle, it's kind of like, if those two had a baby, right? So, for them, definitive is, it describes emptiness and it can be taken literally. Okay? That's definitive. If something doesn't describe emptiness, or even though it describes emptiness, it cannot be taken literally, it's interpretable. Okay? Okay. So, those four reliances, see, it depends who is then talking about it. Asanga goes into that a lot in one of his scriptures, right? Which is primarily, he's referring to the Chitta Mantra view. But now, in general, we can take that, right? So, so you need both, depending on which tenet system you're looking at, right? Because, for example, in the Sautrantika Madhyamika system, they view the Heart Sutra as an interpretable meaning scripture. You understand? We're going to get into this later. For now, see, Bodhisattva Mahasattvara Avalokiteshvara beheld those five aggregates as also being empty of inherent existence. Okay? So for the Sautrantika Madhyamika, actually the aggregates have inherent existence.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, so now when this sutra says, Avalokiteshvara beheld those five aggregates as empty of inherent existence, that cannot be taken literally. So it's an interpretable meaning scripture. Okay? So the words, the meaning actually is emptiness, lack of true existence, right? But the words say lack of inherent existence. So here, you know, the meaning is not, how do you say? It's indicated by the words, but it's not the literal, you know, on the face of the words, right? Therefore, it must be interpreted as something other than what is directly spoken by the words. Anyway, is that, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I understood it when you said that it depends on which school you are applying each of these reliances to. But it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Now, in general, if you wanted to make more trouble and you wanted to debate, then you know, you could then just argue, well, if something is the meaning of the scripture, does it not have to be the definitive meaning of that scripture?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
Has to be.
Has to be, right? So then if you already are saying define the meaning, not on the words, and the meaning does have to be the definitive meaning, then why would you say, then rely on the definitive meaning, not the interpretable meaning?
Because words are interpretable.
Because interpretable meaning is not the words.
Okay. Alright, anyway, let's take a break. Okay? So please have some refreshment.